Welcome. This is Money Heart, where we explore the emotional side of money. I'm Camille Diaz, and today we're discussing shifting out of a recession mindset. My guest is Peri Shawn, an award-winning business author. Peri, welcome to Money Heart.
Great to be here.
Let's start with a little bit of your story. Kind of share more of your money history and how you got to where you are now.
Oh, well, that's a long journey, but I'll try and make it short.
Sounds good.
I come from a background of where everybody was an employee, and so going into the world of being an entrepreneur was a new world for me. I was also a teacher. I was a high school teacher, and I was a single mom, which, being a teacher on a salary that's not that high, and being a single mom, and one of my highest values is learning and teaching, and with that comes the education of my children. And for me, when I'm a believer that when someone has a gift, you fuel that gift as much as you can. And it was really clear that my daughter had a gift with language, and she today speaks 5 languages fluently.
Wow.
And I knew as a mom, being in an English environment, that I loved to provide my daughter with an incredible education. And I knew that because of the gifts she had, it wouldn't necessarily happen in the public school system. And so here I was on a not too great of a salary and the only income for the household, but I made it priority, even though it was a huge percentage of what I was making, to pay for her to get her education, which she even today talks about how grateful she is that she had that opportunity, which, it was a priority that I made way back when. And for me, how do I describe it? It wasn't even a doubt in my mind, but that was just the thing to do, no matter how much money I was making at the time. And for me, it was, going back to being an entrepreneur, I remember the day that I decided to be an entrepreneur fully. And remember, I come from this background of, having jobs. My parents had jobs, my extended family were jobs. And for them, they thought I had the best thing going in the world, that I was a high school teacher, stable job for the rest of my life, would get the pension, the whole thing.
Sure.
They were so disappointed when I decided to be an entrepreneur. And I remember the day when I finally made the decision, and and shared it with my principal. My back went out, my shoulder went out. It was like my emotional response was showing in my body.
Yes.
And which, was a wake-up call to realize how much emotion I had attached to it, which got me doing my personal work on it, because it was, how do you describe it? It was like there's no way I could avoid it. There was nothing else that was significant happening in my life at that time except for that decision and that sharing. And I remember the day. It was December 15th. And so long ago, a couple of decades ago. And that was big for me. I decided to take a sabbatical and to make it safe in that dynamic, and I never went back, which was great. And because I knew as a single mom, I wanted to have time with my kids, so I took off the first month in the summer, which was July. And then I lined up everything for the month of August. So I worked for months to get that lined up. Mm-hmm. And that, to me, that the emotion that I had, the concern I had, emotions that obviously my body used, our bodies, our feedback mechanisms for the emotions that we're having, caused me to plan that much more carefully and to be more organized in that regard, which I'm grateful for to this day. And then after being in that world of business and entrepreneur as a trainer and speaker, I found we ended up doing a coaching dynamic between myself and somebody else in the association, the Speakers Association. And I'm trying to, shorten the story so that we've got the piece, that the important pieces, I guess.
Relevant pieces, sure, yeah.
Yeah. And as we're doing this coaching dynamic, which I'm using the DeMartini method to help him with his grief, and he's helping me with the concepts of going from being an employee to being an entrepreneur, and what does that look like, and how do I set things up? Well, wouldn't you know it, that as we were coaching over time, it became clear that we were both looking forward to those coaching sessions a lot more than we both realized. Actually, other people noticed it first. And then, sorry, go ahead.
They usually do.
Yeah, exactly. And then, amazing enough, we ended up, long story short, my husband now, and when we got married, we decided, several years later, when we decided to get married, it became clear to me, I'm a big believer in the equality of men and women. Here I was coming from the world of teaching where I would make, $250 a day on a good day, you know what I mean? Like, again, and when I'm teaching, not over the summer. And so here I am. At that time, he was making $3,500 a day for a talk. And I'm like, okay, I believe in the equality of men and women. I also believe that here he is. I want this relationship to work. This is when I knew that it was getting serious. I went, I really need to make a choice here. And so I stepped up and I decided that I believed that the relationship was going somewhere. So I decided to charge the same amount as he did. Now you have to remember, he'd been in the world of business for, more than a decade before me, was, the first inductee in the Speaking Hall of Fame. So here I am, putting myself at the same level as him in that dynamic. I did my work. I went through and listed as many benefits as I could possibly find for my clients of me charging that amount. And because at first I obviously had a little bit of emotional reaction to that. And now the great part is that amount that I did all the work on, and I would practice, actually, before I finished the work, I would practice saying it out loud to see how it would roll off the tongue for me. But the great news that came from it was that we actually ended up as being positioned as equals in the business, which was great, which I'm very grateful to this day. And we are as equals at this point, but still.
That's a lovely story. I really enjoyed that. Thank you. So since you kind of specialize in what's going on in the brain with all of money stuff and so forth, and we're talking about transitioning out of a recession mindset today, what sort of changes or things take place in the brain when we hit a recession?
Okay, it varies from person to person. All right. But
sure.
Because every single person, depending on their history, and that's part of what we also have to recognize, is the neuroscience tells us. So I'm all about the neuroscience of leadership and sales. Okay. And when we look at the neuroscience of what actually happens inside of our brains when we get emotionally triggered, we're not just getting emotionally triggered from the event that's happening in this moment. So if we're being triggered by the recession that's happening around us at any particular time, it's not just that moment, it's another moment that has the same emotional content to it from before. And so just like money compounds, our emotions compound. And so we're looking at this moment where we're experiencing the emotion now, but that emotion is also compounded with the emotion that we felt before with a similar circumstance, and before and before and before. So individually, for us to recognize that when we have an emotional reaction, which we may be consciously aware of or unconsciously, and it's showing up in our body because our body is that feedback mechanism, as I shared, for us to recognize that part of us is educating ourselves, but part of it is also doing our personal work. Okay, so part of the personal work is going back over those past moments. Okay, but the other part is to realize when we're listening to the news, what are we actually listening to? Okay, what is it that's actually happening, quote unquote, in the economy? Now, I'm gonna qualify this first. I am not a financial expert. I will say that. I work with people who are financial experts, which causes me to read a fair amount. Okay, so that I'm, yeah, but I will not qualify myself as an expert financially. And so one of the things that we often miss, and the reason why I'm doing this is it's about focus, not get distracted by what's out here.
Put the blinders, stay focused. Yeah.
Stay focused, because what we hear in the news is built. If you hear them, they say the story is. And the reason why they choose a story is because they're trying to choose something that will grasp people's attention, okay? And so they're choosing information that's on the outer spectrums of what is the norm, first off, okay? So they're picking, quite often in a downturn in the economy, when there's a recession, they're choosing the stock market. Now, the stock market is not a measure of the full economy, okay? One, it's often a measure of people's reaction to the news they're hearing, and then they, take actions to sell to, at certain times, depending on your perspective on it. But, and also, the stock market is only what's involved in public business, not the private business, which is a large part of what exists. Mm-hmm. So if we're really looking at a recession, it's to understand what a recession is. A recession is a drop in the economy. Yes. Drop in the stock market? No. And so I think for us to get clear on that, and what is a drop? When I sometimes ask people, what is a recession and how much does the economy drop? And the answers come back 30, 50%. An average recession is 1-2%. 2008, which is considered a major recession, was a drop in the economy of 5%. So what we're looking at is then there's still 95% left, right? and so, the whole idea of, whether is the glass half full or half empty is the perception. And so we will hear a lot of things. We will hear it in the news, we will begin to overgeneralize and cause things to think of them as truths when it's actually pseudo-truths, okay? So the reality is the money, 95% of it is still there. So in the worst case scenario. Now, there's times in which we have a bigger drop that's classified as something else, a depression, okay? And also a recession is over periods of quarters, not just in one instance. So that's the other part you want to take into consideration in this whole thing too. So then what does this have to do with mindset? Mindset is the focus. The mindset is to realize that, yes, the news is going to talk about what it's going to talk about. And I'm not saying ignore it, but just recognize what it is. And that instead go for the facts of what you know. I did an interview with an interesting guy who studied the history all of the recessions over the last 100 and some odd years. And he's discovered these patterns, which is very interesting, and what makes companies successful. Part of it is I do 9/11, SARS in 2008, and I've in business, and I've lived through others because I'm the number of decades behind me is probably more than probably halfway, maybe. We'll see, a little more than halfway. But I'm close to that 60 mark. And so with that in mind, I've seen a few things. And the money is still there. It's just being spent in a different way. Okay. Imagine if you had to cut back your budget your family budget by 5%. You'd still be spending money. And historically, we've not had a period in which, since money has been around, that we've not spent money. But somehow, emotionally, we think money is not being spent. So part of that is to recognize what's triggering us individually, but also to get clear on those. So we understand, how to get our mind in a place where we're ready, that the business is there. The question is just, where is it? If it's shifted from your current world at this point in time.
So really just figuring out where your customers are, where your business is, where that money actually does exist.
Yes.
It might just not be in that little 5% spot where you're searching for it.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
And so now you've got 99% to go look at, right?
Oh, goodness, if I would just turn around.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
There it is. Yeah.
It's almost like standing, at some place, like say the Grand Canyon, and you're facing the part that's filled with trees, the forest part. And then if you would just turn around, you'd see that whole canyon behind you.
Yes, exactly.
So you're like, oh, this is a nice park. Oh, wow.
Exactly.
I love that. So when we get stuck looking at that sort of little 5%, how does that really have an effect on our business and our relationships and things like that? Like, why does it matter that we remember to see
that's such a great question. Why does it matter? Because if we get stuck in that 5%, it's almost like getting stuck in no man's land. It's meaning that you'll be spinning your wheels trying to generate revenue. You'll get yourself more emotionally charged, as we'll call it. Okay. And an individual in that dynamic, it's a hard place to be. And my experience has been is because if your recession, your marketplace will shift. Who's buying, who's not. And so if you have this as your, who your clientele are as a general rule, and you're, all of a sudden they're not buying it, or a portion of them are not buying, it doesn't mean you drop them. And that's an important aspect, because all of a sudden, goodbye, see you later. Yeah. Recognize it's a temporary thing. Okay. It's not pervasive. And so to me, part of what we do is still, to me, I've got, most of my clients are doing pretty well at this time. There's a few that aren't, and they've been hit just because of the industry they're in or something. And I still am serving them. And part of that is I've had conversations, help them out with what I can. And then I'm still serving through social media, but I'm working with those who are choosing to buy. You don't drop them. That's an important aspect, because a business goes like this quite often.
Yeah, up and down, up and down.
Up and down. And to me, ideally, problem is most people think business is always going to be up. The reality is it's going to have the down, and we don't get prepared for the down part. And so to me, part of it is how do you structure things? I'm grateful most of my clients are what are called essential services, which is helpful in regards to what I do. But the thing is, we can structure our business that way, but we go into this, or as our clients go into this downturn, don't drop them. You know, when they come out of it, they're still going to need somebody. And the good thing is, if you enjoy working with them and there'll be that opportunity when they come back out of it. But still to serve in that regard is my perception, because you want to know, who are you? You're serving in a large space, and you're looking for who is actually buying in that regard, and that's where you figure out where that shift from this, where's that 5% shift that you're doing.
I love that idea of making sure you're still serving the other people, because I think it's easy for us to go, well, those guys aren't buying right now, I'm out, and
right.
Not provide anything, not follow up, not worry about maintaining your list or whatever it is that you normally do. And
right.
Then when they come back and they're ready to buy again, it's not going to be from you if you're no longer connected to them.
Right.
Yeah. Really good point. I love that. It's something to think about of how can we still serve the people that are our clients, even though they're not ready to buy anything right now. So,
right. Okay. Yeah. Because I had one person share with me recently. She said, I would so love to have you working with me every day. I said, great. She said, but right now with what's going on with my client base, I can't do that. I said, great. And so now, she has the opportunity to be exposed to what I do through social media. And I often have taken in some of the things that she shared with me, and I've shared in the social media, which is great.
Oh, that is great. Yeah. And social media is a great tool for that, because it's a way to stay engaged with people, and it's free for them to access and typically free for us to use and engage on. So, they don't have to spend anything to be able to do that with us. And it doesn't take a ton of resources on our part to serve a lot of people that way.
Right.
So yeah, we can definitely stay connected. That's perfect. Any other tips to either rewire our thinking or work around or kind of get that little bit different mindset?
I was actually speaking earlier with a group of entrepreneurs, and one of the things that we were looking at was often when you hit something like a recession or something that you see as a glitch in your business, we often will allow our emotions to go this way.
Oh yeah, way down.
and that's a normal human response. So I'm not saying ignore that, but find a good coach who can help you through that would be the thing that I would recommend.
Yes.
And I'd also recommend that part of this, because we look at it through the lens of your business, I'm a believer that everything happens for a reason. And yes, business is up here sometimes, and then sometimes it comes down here. When you're down in this spot, what happens sometimes is that it points out the weakness in your business model. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so when there's a per se, that to look at it and say, all right, what's the benefit of this to me? And make a list. I remember years ago when I got incredibly sick. Literally, I couldn't walk across the floor without feeling exhausted. Okay. Wow. From one side of the room to the other. I couldn't go up and down stairs. It was going up and down the stairs to get in and out of our house, which is 3 stairs, was too much for me.
Oh gosh. That's really sick.
That's really, really sick. And when I got really, really sick, it made me think about my business in a different way. Now, could I have gotten depressed in that moment? I could have. And I had my moments. And we all do. And that's okay. It's important for us to be human. But I did my work. I made my list. And I realized that I had an opportunity to create my business in a way in which I didn't have to be there. And that caused me to look at and create product in a different way. So I designed online materials. Can you this. I designed online materials, animated programs, et cetera, et cetera. I had cartoonists, I had animators, et cetera, that ended up working with me, 32 staff members, to pull this off so that I don't have to be, if I died tomorrow, all of the information, well, not all of it, but most of it, that would make a huge difference that I had at that time, that is classic, that is timeless, is all now documented for people to use. And do you think that might be helpful at this time when so much has gone virtual?
Yes.
It is.
Yeah,
and
just
so,
a little bit.
Just a little bit. And so sometimes in the moment it happens, we don't always see the gift that is there. But part of it is, okay, how am I feeling? Huh? All right, now let's look at, I'm feeling that way because I'm seeing more negatives and positives. Where's the positive in this? And let's list. I made a long list that was over 250 that caused me to shift what I was doing because I could think, couldn't move very well, but I could definitely think.
Yes.
And that worked out me, obviously, in the long run.
Yeah. Well, that's what a wonderful idea of creating that evergreen content that is available for anyone, anywhere, anytime.
Exactly.
They just pay you and it shows up and you don't have to worry about it. And so you don't have to repeat that lesson. So while you're sick or on vacation or whatever, let's hope next time you're on a fabulous trip, you just refer people over to this content that you already have ready, and then your income's still going because your content's there. So yeah, beautiful idea. Love that.
Yeah.
Love that. Well, this has been awesome. Thank you so much, Peri. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been good to be here.
If you guys would like to get in touch with Peri, she has a Facebook group geared toward entrepreneurs, and it's called Selling with Science and Soul. So jump on and ask to join that group. Thank you as well to all of our listeners and viewers. I'm your host, Camille Diaz. This show is sponsored by Serenity Financial, a Five Rings financial agency, specializing in financial education, living benefits, and guaranteed lifetime income. Today's money mantra is one that Peri helped me pick out, and she chose for us, and it is, I wisely generate, save, spend, and invest money. Thank you.
Thank you.